Hi, my name is Marty Rodgers, and I am the Office Managing Director for Accenture in Washington, D.C., and then I also have the honor of leading our health and public service business in the Southeast.
Okay.
And I'm soon going to become our lead for the whole Southeast region, and very excited about it.
Great. Well, so nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you as well.
I'm Rosa Ramos-Kwok. I'm a Managing Director at JPMorgan Chase.
Excellent.
And also a board member of HITEC and their vice chair.
All right. So thank you for your board service. And thank you for working with JPMorgan. Wherever we are, you guys are.
I know. We stick together. So we're going to stick together for the next several minutes here, too.
Awesome.
So we, Marty, we just came from your keynote speech on the first day of our Summer Leadership Summit here at Freddie Mac.
Okay.
And I'd have to say I was really touched.
Oh,
it was not what I was expecting. Talk about unconscious bias and having preconceived notions.
Different use of the term in that regard. Yes,
a different use, a little bit, but like we all have expectations.
Right.
So I researched your background.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations on your recent promotion.
Thank you very much.
We're all very proud of you.
Thank you.
And so I was expecting something very different.
Okay.
And what I heard was a little bit of a history lesson and a reminder of what it means to be a true leader. Okay. How did you cultivate that story? Because it was one fascinating, and it was something clearly that you delivered from the heart.
Yeah. Well, I think the easiest way to share that, Rosa, is just I have always been taught, and both by words but also example, that I stand on the shoulders of others, and I have always been blessed with amazing role models and amazing mentors and amazing leaders that I have had the privilege of working with. Whether that's my parents, or when I was working on Capitol Hill, or working on children's advocacy, or even coming up through Accenture. And so that has always, I've always believed that it has been my responsibility to lift as I climb. And I have moved back and forth as I've climbed between for-profit, nonprofit, and government. And so those stories have come from all three of the sectors. And I've always believed that it's the responsibility of all three of those sectors to work together on the biggest issues of our time, whether that's education or environment or social justice or healthcare or whatever the topic may be. And that all of us, regardless of our station in life, have that responsibility to give back and to make a difference and to serve. And so whether it's client service or it's public service or it's community service, we all have that same ethic that we were asked to live our lives by. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
And you, you mentioned that we're living in revolutionary times.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a quote, right?
Yep, absolutely. Now, that quote originally was from Dr. King, but I believe that still holds true today. And there's all of these forces, whether they're technological or they're socioeconomic or political, that are making our times the most important times, arguably, in history. And we don't have a lot of time left to make some key decisions about where we're going, both as, in some cases, for our companies, in other cases for our communities, and in other cases for our country and the world. And so time is short, time is of the essence. As Dr. King would say, tomorrow is today, even though we might prefer it otherwise. And we must choose. And so that's really where we are. And we will either be remembered for this moment in history for what we did do or for what we failed to do. And I really believe for the folks at HITEC that is, we have to be called to be on that side of agency and that side of action and that side of creating movement and creating opportunity and being there to harness those forces that are to come and to shape them in ways that are going to lift all boats.
In so many different ways, right?
Absolutely.
So not just,
Absolutely.
not just politically
Yes.
or socially, right? I mean,
Right.
it's technology as well in the world of AI.
Completely.
And when we think
You know,
about bias and things like that.
Absolutely. I mean, there was just the study that was recently done. I'm an old Capitol Hill rat, right? And used to work on Capitol Hill. And there was a study kind of fusing those worlds together, which showed, hey, there are 535 members of Congress. There are additional 6 members that are from territories. And when you add all of those together, they found false positives when they ran a database of members of Congress against criminals. They found 28 false positives, right? And so first it tells us, hey, we've got to keep making technology better and work better, but we also have to ask who controls that technology and what is that database that first comprises what the match is going to be run against. And then when you pause and you realize that of those 28 that they found, half of the false positives were people of color, right? And that is obviously not the proportionality of who is in Congress. We've got a lot of work to do. And we have a responsibility, especially at HITEC, that we are part of those institutions that are going to control and shape that technological revolution, because the communities and the people that will be left behind if we're not at the table are going to be, those that will be left behind are going to be our own.
So this is why we need to be seen.
Absolutely.
And heard.
Yep.
And say our name.
Yep.
And be felt.
And be felt. That's exactly right.
Yep.
Yeah, those are my 4 key kind of points of guidance for everybody, and to have the courage to do all 4 of those. And it really does take courage to do it, right? To step out, to use your voice, to be yourself. And that's really, I believe, what our companies really need us to be. If we are going to drive innovation, if we're going to drive change, they need a different style of leader. They need different experiences. They need different stories. And everyone in that room is ready and poised to take it to the next level and to bring others up behind them to the next level.
So let's talk a little bit about you as a leader.
Sure.
As you mentioned, you're taking on new responsibilities.
Yes,
That's
very honored and humbled by. Yes.
Yes, and you are very humble about it, but you are a senior managing director.
That's right.
Right.
Yep.
So
Yep.
very, very senior at Accenture.
Mm-hmm.
What about your journey? How were mentors inspirational in your path to where you are?
Yes.
So maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Sure, absolutely. So I've always been lifted up by mentors and by sponsors along my journey. I started my journey way back when, believing, again, as we talked about, that I wanted to move back and forth between for-profit, nonprofit, and government, and that there's real power in bringing all 3 together. I did that before going to graduate school, and then after graduate school, I joined Accenture and have pursued all 3 since joining Accenture. And so I started my career in for-profit, working in financial services. I then moved over to our government practice because the market crashed. So even though I was loving financial services, the market crashed. And
we miss you. Come back.
Exactly. See, I'd be hanging out with JPMorgan nowadays.
That's right.
But yeah, so the market had crashed, so I had to go do something else. I landed upon government. Enjoyed that, loved that, and was working primarily in our federal space. And then I started up our nonprofit practice and our international public sector practice. So working with amazing organizations, Habitat for Humanity, World Wildlife Fund, the UN, a whole variety of folks that were out there that were mission-based, trying to change the world and change the country. And then from there, I was tapped to lead our largest office in North America, which is our Washington, D.C. office. And then
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I did not know that. I figured it would have been in New York.
No. We're coming up on 9,000 strong here in D.C. And then was then tapped on the shoulder to lead our Health and Public Service group, which is about 3 years ago. And now I'm going to lead all of our Southeast region. To your question around the journey, I have had amazing mentors and sponsors of all ethnicities, all genders, backgrounds, that have shown me the way, and I therefore find that responsibility to in turn show others. Some of those folks, first I would emphasize that it's always been plural. You can never have just one mentor or just one sponsor. And then I've always had folks that were mentors and sponsors both inside the firm and outside the firm. and that has also been really key to my growth and my development. And the last thing I would just say is anytime you get one of these roles, especially for you as a managing director, myself as a managing director, it comes from our old heritage, right, as a partnership. And so there's still that sense of stewardship, but there's also still that sense of, we always hear people say all the time, hey, I became partner in such and such a day, or I became a managing director in such and such a year.
You never forget that day.
Right, you never forget it. But
never forget
I always remind people, Rosa, that's actually not the correct way to say it, right? The actual correct English is to say you were made a partner, you were made a managing director. There's kind of the transitive versus intransitive. There's the active versus passive. And the reason that's important is it speaks to the fact that none of us do it on our own. We are always lifted up by others. That make us that next level, whether it's managing director or senior managing director or whatever the case may be. And so I always find that to be an important distinction, that just like when you graduate, the correct English is you don't graduate from your university, you are graduated from, right? And you're lifted up by your professors and the staff and by your fellow students.
That's right. So, and leaders, I always go back to leadership is not about leading.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
It's about establishing followership.
Right. Well, and it's not about you, right?
It's not about you. You mentioned that. It's not about you. It's about them.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you also are on a number of public boards. Right. And that is something.
I'm trying to follow your lead with HITEC.
Oh, I don't know about that, but you definitely have me beat on that one. No. But tell us about how you balance it all, or integrate it all, as Nellie would say. It's not about balance, about integration, right?
Absolutely.
So how do you integrate your role, your very senior role at Accenture? You spoke very passionately about your family. That's a very big part of your life.
Yep.
And then you also serve on a number of boards. And I think you mentioned 5 right now that you're serving on, right? So how do you balance all of that? How do you integrate all of that?
Yeah, so I'm a full believer. I don't really believe in work-life balance. I do believe in integration, as you're mentioning, and I believe in mashing it all up. And so on my calendar, I literally schedule everything, and I let all of my direct reports see my entire calendar. So they know if I have a big client meeting, they know if I'm going to a board meeting, they know if I'm trying to do a community service activity. If I have an office event, they also know if I have to get to my daughter's recital or to my son's lacrosse game. And so I just make all of that transparent, and I throw everything on the calendar, and I try to get to more, not less. And I think the other key thing about it, right, is none of us are perfect, right? And it's never going to be, hey, we get exactly how much we want to do in all 3 of those different areas. But I really do believe in work, life, and community integration. And I think the thing that we risk and the thing that we lose most is the community part if we don't mash it up and put it in as part of our schedule. And so that's a really big thing for me. Yes, it does limit how much time I might have for my kids, but I also want my kids to know that I'm trying to make the world that they're going to inherit better. And I don't want them looking back and saying, hey, Dad, when all this stuff was going on, what did you do? And I don't want to not have an answer to the question. So.
How important is it for you to be a role model?
Wow, that's a tough question. I don't really think about being a role model. I think about doing, and I think about trying to make things better. It's sort of in my DNA. And so whether that's making my client better, or making our firm better, or making the community better, or making my family better, that's how I think about things. Whether or not somebody sees you as a role model is really up to them, and it's not really up to you. So that's a really tough but good question.
Well, you say you mentioned in your keynote that we have to think about our brand, and we have a brand, and we have to cultivate that, right? I've done some work with Girls Who Code.
Oh, it's awesome group. We do a huge thing with our
I know. And Rashma Shahjani, who leads Girls Who Code, is very famous for saying you cannot be what you cannot see.
Very true.
And in our community, I think that is so true, because we do have to own our brand and own our story.
Right.
Which is why I asked you the role model question,
Yeah.
because it is important for you to be seen.
Absolutely.
And for people to see you for that, because
Absolutely.
you cannot be, people could say, hey, like,
and
I want to be like Marty.
Well, that's true, but we also share that extra pressure, right? Because we know the world's watching, right? And we know that we have to, every time we break the ceiling, we've got to rise to that, because we know it's harder on the next person coming later if we don't rise. And so I hope that my story does help inspire folks. I hope it does make people want to have aspiration. I firm, and my whole belief system is about aspiration. We talk all the time in our society about aspiration versus ambition, right? And we often conflate them, but they're very different words, right? And my ambition is really a negative, and it's about kind of a scarcity model. And it really says, hey, in order for me to advance, I've got to hold you back. It says that there's not enough to go around, and it's a zero-sum game. And aspiration is very different, right? That it also, like ambition comes from the Latin, but it means to breathe life into, to make those around you better. And it's an abundance model, and it means that sort of that lifting as you climb. And that's really what I want to be about. And I want to be about being the type of leader, and hopefully the type of role model that others will see, helping others become role models.
And we could all rise.
Exactly. It's
not like a one thing. Exactly. We could all rise. I think that's also another reason why it's important to share stories.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because people learn from them.
Yep.
And it could give you inspiration. That's great.
Right. And we need a lot more inspiration and a lot less management.
Yeah. So let's talk about you. You mentioned that you were mentored by your Notre Dame.
Yes. Father Hesper.
Father Hesper.
Yeah. There's a new movie out about him. Yeah. It's awesome.
Oh, okay. I'm going to watch that one in addition to your other recommendation too.
Cool.
But how important was mentorship in you thinking like, this is what I want to aspire to?
Yeah.
And also, a father who's quite spiritual, right? So and I sense that in you, that there's a little bit more, your authenticness also comes from you being very grounded. And it seems to me like a little bit of spirituality, right?
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
How important are mentors to you?
Yeah.
And sponsors? Yeah. Maybe a share story. And then how are you mentoring others?
Yeah.
And what do you take back from that?
Well, so mentors and sponsors are critical for all of us, and in particular for those of us that are diverse within large corporations, they become paramount. Yeah. They're very different roles. The sponsor is the person that's at the table that has the power to make a difference. The mentor is somebody that speaks with you, and the sponsor is somebody that speaks about you. I have been blessed with both. Several seminal moments in my career, sponsors either that I knew I had or sponsors that I didn't even know I had have reached down and picked me up and picked me for really critical stretch assignments, critical new roles, and even when I made managing director. I tell
when you were made.
When I was made a managing director. Thank you. You're really good because you worked in aspiration earlier too. But when I was made a managing director, and there was one of the stories I tell all the time was actually that event of being made a managing director. I was kind of clueless. I was sort of the mindset that, hey, I'm doing great work, and they should know that, and if they don't, shame on them. And that really wasn't how it should have been, or how I should have been thinking about it. And one of my, I was going through this whole course in the process of becoming a managing director, and wasn't even really clued into how it worked or any of those types of things. And one day
it's a process. I know it's a process in financial services. Right.
It is definitely a process.
I'm kind of assuming that it's very similar at Accenture, that it's a whole vetting process.
Yeah. And so, very long story short, there was an individual who scared the daylights out of me. And I always thought every time I met him, I thought he was going to fire me. And just this, legendary figure at Accenture. And the only time I had ever interacted with him before, I had messed something up, and failure is part of the process. And he let me know that I had messed something up. And so I lived in kind of fear of this guy. And one time I was over at one of my clients, and I bumped into him, and he was like, "Hey, let's go to lunch." And I thought, oh goodness, that means I'm going to go to lunch.
You're going to get,
and I'm going to get
no,
fired.
usually you're getting called to
over.
an office,
Exactly.
though. Like lunches, you're probably okay.
All right. Well, I wasn't thinking that. I was just thinking,
right.
it's all over. So just advancing the story. The day before, I go to this lunch here in Washington, D.C. at this place called the Bombay Club, and it's just wonderful, amazing restaurant. And but that evening, I happened to get get sick. And I had their signature dish, which is the salmon, and I don't know what made me sick, but I just was feeling awful. And my lunch was supposed to be with him the next day. And so we go down the street, and I'm still debating whether or not I should cancel, but you don't cancel on this particular individual. We go to this other restaurant, and they don't have his reservation. So he's not happy, he's yelling, et cetera, et cetera. And he says, we're not going to worry about it. Let's just go across the street to the Bombay Club.
Oh my gosh.
So we go to the Bombay Club, and we go to sit down, and he says, in a very gruff way, after they clear everything out, it's like, "Hey, you'd be an idiot not to order the salmon," is what he tells me. And I'm like, oh, he didn't just say that, right? And I'm not here again just after last night. But anyway, so that person ended up being
Did you have
one of my
salmon?
Sponsors. I had the salmon
again,
and
you got really sick.
And I did not. It was wonderful. And he ended up being one of my sponsors, and it came time to when folks were up for managing director. I was called in by the head of our unit, and she told me I didn't make it. And hey, good first run, but you didn't make it. And several days later, I got called back in, and she said, "Hey, guess what? Things have changed. You're going to make it."
They psyched you out.
Exactly, psyched me out.
Oh my God.
But the difference is that individual said, "Hey, I was looking at the list and it's missing a name." And he put my name on it. So that's what sponsors do. They're the folks at the table. They make the difference.
They make the difference.
Yeah.
And so in your career, I'm curious, because for women, one of the things that we talk a lot about in terms of careers, and Sheryl Sandberg of Facebook is very famous for saying, or one of the things that she always says is that careers are a jungle gym.
Careers are?
A jungle gym.
Okay, got it.
It's not like a linear growth, right? It's you take lateral moves, you go setbacks. Has that been your experience, or has it been like you're like straight shot, started, you get promoted year after year, no setbacks ever?
Yeah, no. So we all we all fail, and we all fail epically.
Yeah.
That's one of the key things for folks coming after us to know.
Yeah.
Like I've lost my share of big deals. I've had my client challenges. I've gotten thrown off of a project early in my career. So we've all had our challenges in different stages of the journey. I would also just say, for me, one of the things that when I was first coming out of undergrad, I started in corporate America. Then I went to work for a leading nonprofit organization. Then I went to work for government. And then I did service work. And my salary was declining at each stage of the journey. So I had to have this long conversation with my dad, because my dad was like, "Hey, son, I don't know if you know, but it's supposed to work the other way. Every year you're out, the salary's supposed to go up. And oh, by the way, you're not moving back into the house." And so we all have had our ups and downs. We've all for me, I've kind of followed the story where it led, and followed the question where it leads, and just believe that if you're open and you listen to the sound of the genuine within yourself, the story will unfold, and you just have to be open to it unfolding. And what might look like the worst experience and the worst opportunity can sometimes turn out to be the best. And what might look like the greatest opportunity can sometimes turn out to be the worst, right? And so you just have to be kind of truly listening to what is the right potential next stage of the journey, and be open to it, and try to make the best of it, and make sure you learn from it, and then the rest of it.
And this is a lot where mentors sometimes come into play too, right? To like show you, hey, here's another way to take a look at this opportunity or this date. So what inspires you every day?
That's pretty easy. My kids inspire me every day. I have amazing kids. One is just getting back from an eco trip where he was tagging sea turtles in Belize, and it was he's kind of my emerging environmentalist. And then another just got back from Lima, Peru, where she was climbing Machu Picchu with her grandmother. And then my little one is my angel, and just has my heart. And so they keep me humble, they keep me motivated, they keep me moving. That definitely keeps me inspired. I also, we talked about it earlier, but I have been blessed with amazing mentors and people that literally have changed the country and the world. And so they have been part of in some cases, 30, 40, 50-year journey, trying to, it is said that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Well, these are people that have truly bent the arc, right? And so just seeing them each and every day get up, trying to make a difference, whether it's for kids or for healthcare or for civil rights or for any number of other causes that they were committed to, that they believed in, that they dedicated their lives to, really keeps me inspired. Trying to live up to their story, their expectations, but also their aspirations. And so, that's what keeps me moving.
Okay, all right. So you are really successful. You are a great dad. Wonderful family that's doing extremely well. You're inspirational. You can certainly hold your own in a room. we know that. Hold everyone's attention. What do people? Give me a fun fact, something that people don't know about you. Let us in on a little secret about Marty that maybe you haven't shared with anyone else other than us high-tech people.
Okay. So some of it maybe we'll find fitting to the story. I don't know. One fun fact is I was very involved and engaged in creating a program called AmeriCorps. So AmeriCorps is bringing the Peace Corps home, and it's City Year and Teach for America and Habitat for Humanity and Public Allies and all these amazing organizations. I spent about almost 5 years of my life working on the legislation and trying to get the legislation passed. I also wrote the legislation to create the Martin Luther King holiday as a national day of service. And
Thank you for that.
Most welcome. And it's always service, and that whole idea of giving back has been very much a part of my story. I had been on the Hill working on all this different service legislation, and then felt kind of hypocritical that I actually hadn't served. So I went and served in Gallup, New Mexico, with the largest Roman, but also poorest Roman Catholic diocese. The poorest Roman Catholic diocese out there. And then the last kind of fun fact is I have met every president since Carter. I have not met President Trump yet, but he's next on my agenda.
Oh, so, that is a great fun fact.
Literally have met everyone except for President Trump.
Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Marty, I want to thank you for continuing the conversation with HITEC.
Absolutely.
You're an inspiration, and
thank
you for your service.
Yes.
And thank you for being a part of our family.
Thank you very much. And the last thing I would just say, HITEC makes us so much better, and so it's been a great partnership. Accenture is better as a company. We're better able to serve our clients, and we just have so many leaders that have gone through and been part of the HITEC experience, and you have made them so much better that they are in turn transforming us and transforming our clients. So thank you.
As I like to say, it's a mutual adoration society.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
thank you so
cool.
much.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.